Mike Bernhardt for the Exascale Computing Project at Argonne National Lab today, and my guest today is Rick Stevens. Rick's the Associate Lab Director for Computing, Environment, and Life Sciences at Argonne, and he's a Professor of Computer Science at the University of Chicago. And for the Exascale Computing Project, Rick is a Principal Investigator on a project called CANDLE, the Cancer Distributed Learning Environment. So Rick, welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it's been about a year, I guess, since we sat down with you and talked about CANDLE.
Went by very fast.
It certainly did. Yeah, so we have a lot more followers who have been picking up on the topic of Exascale and interested in following the Exascale Computing Project over the last year. So for the sake of this new audience, maybe you could give us a quick overview of what CANDLE's all about.
Sure. Well, CANDLE is a collaboration. It's a 4-lab collaboration. Argonne, Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, and Livermore. And it's a collaboration to build the software environment for solving very large-scale distributed learning problems on the DOE Leadership Computing platforms. So it's aiming at the biggest platforms for Exascale, and it's to make it easy to use these platforms for solving machine learning problems with a particular focus on 3 different problems in cancer research. So one of them is on predicting the response of drugs from cancer cells. Another one is to analyze cancer medical records to be able to figure out diagnosis and information from unstructured text, essentially, that could be used to build models for large-scale population response to cancer treatment. And the third one is to get at the inner workings of cancer biology to help manage simulations that are simulating the proteins and the protein mutations that happen in cancer cells.
You know, something that's never been asked, or at least I haven't asked it in past interviews with you and talking with you, is why Department of Energy for a cancer-related project?
Well, so this project originated as part of a broad collaboration between the Department of Energy and the National Cancer Institute to partner with the Frederick National Lab for Cancer Research and the Department of Energy laboratories to bring together the mathematics and computer science expertise and the high-performance computing expertise of DOE with the very deep, long-standing research program in cancer that the National Cancer Institute funds, to bring these things together and to look for ways to accelerate cancer research. So this is part of the Cancer Moonshot Initiative to accelerate cancer research by like a factor of 2 to do like 10 years worth of research in 5 years. And so the deep learning is deep in the problems that we're working on as part of that collaboration. And it brings together expertise that the National Cancer Institute just doesn't have very much of in-house.
Yeah. So you mentioned the deep learning. So think in terms of an application that's going to address something as complicated, medical conditions, cancer, and so forth. Obviously, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, all of those things could come into play. This isn't just about fast computers.
No, there's a lot. I mean, it's really about data-driven modeling. So how can we take the large data collections that we have, either from laboratory experiments or from medical records, and then use the most advanced computational methods to extract information and to build predictive models from that data that we can then use to drive cancer research forward. So it's also about integrating data that comes from simulations. So some of the molecular simulations that involve cancer pathways and generate huge amounts of data from individual molecular configurations and trajectory information. And we want to use deep learning to kind of process that data and to gain some insight from that data. So it's all about the data, really, and it's all about trying to find ways of building predictive models from this data that then can be combined with other information we have to advance cancer research.
So in terms of thinking of really fast computers and large volumes of data and so forth, you could do things like that today.
We can do some of it today. What we can't do today is really ask super hard questions about the underlying methodology. So we recently, as part of the CANDLE project, went through our review, and one of the things that we laid out as part of that review are the specific problems in cancer that need an exascale, right? And all 3 of our sub-areas have these kinds of problems. But one of the things that we need to use exascale computing for is to really sort through the potentially thousands of ways of combining the data, the different ways of constructing deep learning networks to find the right combinations of data, the right model structures, and the right settings of these deep learning configurations that give us the best predictions, and then apply those models at a very large scale to very large amounts of data. So in the case of, like, for example, the cancer patient trajectories, what we also call it's the cancer registry databases. We have the cancer records in those systems for about 14 million cancer patients. And once we train the models to extract the salient information, we want to apply those to the millions of cancer records to then extract that information to build agent-based models that allow us to understand how the patient population as a whole behaves, how treatment strategies change or are specific to different parts of the country or different demographics, and how improvements to cancer therapy might then be rolled out across the whole population. So these are really large-scale problems at the end of the day, and we need the exascale to be able to go from the insights on specific test cases to push them out for the entire large-scale population.
So is there currently, or is there plans to have, say, like an interaction with the drug companies, the pharmaceutical companies?
So there's several spin-off programs that are tied, that the Candle's involved in, that are involved with the pharmaceutical companies, with GlaxoSmithKline and with others. So we're talking to them. Also, some of the emerging healthcare companies that really are being created around the concept of precision oncology. So this idea of assaying the tumors and getting detailed measurements from patients, and then combining that information to help advise the therapeutic choices for those patients. So there's a number of companies like Tempus and others that we're collaborating with that also are part of this general cancer enterprise. So I think Candle and the NCI pilot projects are actually touching a lot of the company space, both in pharma and with these treatment strategy companies.
It's such a complex project, and I assume that a lot of the data you deal with is confidential. You're dealing with people's medical records.
Well, in the case of the medical records, there's some of that data is confidential. There's ways of producing de-identified data, that is data where you've essentially scrubbed it of anything that could identify the specific patient. So there's also ways of taking the raw data and doing what's called embedding. So think embeddings are where you take the words, say, and translate them into a vector space. So now what I have is a vector space representation which I could freely share. We could look at it, we couldn't make sense out of it in terms of the words, but we can compute on it just fine. So there's ways of actually making the data into a form that we can compute on it safely and securely and preserving privacy. In the drug response predictions, the vast majority of that work is actually upstream. It's not on patients, it's on cell lines or on animal experimental data, which doesn't have this challenge. And then of course the molecular level data doesn't have this challenge. So the vast majority of what we're working on in Candle is actually very open.
So at some point, right here at Argonne, we're going to have an exascale platform.
That's right, yeah.
So
it'll be over there, that way somewhere.
What do you anticipate is the first task related to Candle that you might load on an exascale platform?
Well, the first thing we got to do is we have to get the underlying tools to be optimized for that platform, and that work is actually already started. It started as part of our collaborations with Intel and with Cray. So as the machine becomes closer to reality, those optimizations will go through a series of improvements on prototype hardware and so forth. So we will have the underlying tools very optimized, and then we will do an initial set of computations that just basically check that we get what we expect. So these kind of sanity checking experiments, and then we'll fire up some big runs. And in some of these big runs, we're going to try some computations that really can't be accomplished now. For example, in drug response prediction, we want to refine the models to be very specific by cancer type. So that means that now instead of having a single model that is able to train on data from all kinds of cancer and predict on all kinds of cancer with some accuracy. We want to try refining that model to where we tune the model for the given type that it's training on and the given type that it's predicting on. That means that the underlying space of models grows by a factor of on the order of 1,000. And that hasn't been done yet at this scale, so that's one of the kinds of problems. In the case of the medical records analysis, again, we want to build models that are tuned to the specific kinds of questions that we're asking. And part of the challenge over the next few years is to understand very precisely the kinds of questions that we need to answer to build agent-based models for the whole population, and then we build very specific machine learning models for answering each of those questions and tie them together in an ensemble. And it's that ensemble that needs to run at exascale. So each one of these problems has kind of layers upon layers, kind of like an onion where we're building up complexity. And the exascale allows us to push deeper into that complexity space than we've ever been able to do before. And also to check our work and to build into these systems this notion of quantifying a uncertainty. So this is something that's been ongoing for the last year or so, and we're building this deeply into the Candle infrastructure, is the ability to do uncertainty quantification. And the basic idea is that instead of having a single machine learning model that makes one single prediction, like a yes or no answer or something like that, instead, that model will, when you're training it or when you're training it and when you're doing inference, you'll get out an answer, but you'll also get out a distribution of answers. That is a confidence interval or a standard deviation, depending on whether it's a regression problem or a classification problem. And so that's more like what you get from an experiment, where you'd have error bars, right? So some parts of the model might be very accurate and also very confident. Other parts of it might be less confident. And in fact, if the model's not confident enough, we might have a cutoff. We might say, unless you're 90% confident of the answer, we don't want to actually put that answer out there. And so this idea of making machine learning models that not only can make a prediction, but estimate the confidence in that prediction is critical to what we're doing. And that capability increases the amount of computing we have to do, in some cases by order of magnitude or more. And so it's something that you need. The exascale helps us with that. So that's one direction that we're moving in. Another thing that's happening is that the Candle infrastructure, the Candle tools, it's both tools and a runtime system that runs on the computers and a bunch of benchmarks and tutorials and so forth, are becoming quite popular in the community. So this infrastructure has been installed at the National Cancer Institute. And we're starting to get collaborators in areas outside of cancer. So we have people coming in that want to apply this technology on problems in climate, understanding clouds, understanding materials prediction, understanding brain related diseases, whether it's traumatic brain injury or brain cancer, and more generally just imaging, so bringing imaging into this. So what we've decided to do in Candle is expand the repository of problems so that we have our cancer problems, and these are our benchmarks that we're improving for the Exascale project, but collect as many related problems as possible that are benefiting from this infrastructure to show people how to do it, and those may eventually become additional Exascale applications down the road.
Right. That makes so much sense, and I know that's been a goal of ECP from the beginning, is to make sure that even though we're targeting a set of defined applications, that the benefits trickle down or filter out to a lot of other particular uses. So tell me a little bit about working with this project as a part of the Exascale Computing Project. What's the benefit to doing it that way?
Well, so one of the great benefits of the Exascale Computing Project is that it's a kind of a crucible of activity that involves other groups that are also trying to solve exascale problems. And so we have collaborations with some of the co-design center activities and with the numerical libraries people and some of the software tools people that all are moving forward on increasing scalability, increasing data volume, and so forth, that we can then leverage. So it gives us leverage. It's a big part of it. It also allows us to be in the sweet spot with vendors. So each of our vendor collaborators in the ECP have expressed a lot of interest in the Candle codes and benchmarks, and so we're collaborating with each of them, making sure that they can, of course, run the tools and understand them, but also engage with them in potential optimizations of future hardware to benefit these kinds of deep learning applications. And then finally, there's the ECP, as you know, has created a project called Exalearn, which is trying to broaden the machine learning across the 8 labs that are involved in the Exascale program. And this fall, we're having a workshop between the Candle project and the Exalearn project to figure out how to leverage each other. One thing that Candle team wants to get is a kind of a priority of requirements coming out of the broader labs for things that we could add into Candle and make it more useful for them. Okay. And then Exalearn wants to understand what Candle has already done so that they can build on top of that and do complementary things. So that's a very positive direction. It helps move the ECP forward in machine learning in general. And then we're very interested in improving and simplifying the Candle tool set. So later this fall there's a Candle retreat where we're redesigning the interface to try to simplify it and kind of reduce the amount of work that somebody has to do to make their deep learning application kind of fit into the Candle framework.
Okay. Would I be right in assuming that the team that's working on Candle is growing?
Well, the team in terms of the people that come to the meetings is growing. Of course, the funding for Candle isn't growing, so the team isn't actually the team that's funded isn't getting any bigger. But our hackathons now have easily 30, 40 people at them. We do hackathons every quarter, and we've been making them very open. So other projects at labs or universities that have a reason or interest in connecting, they're always welcome.
Good. I know, and people always look for these milestones. They look for accomplishments. So what have you done today, kind of a thing. And a project like this, it has a long reach. There's a lot of progress, but not necessarily the progress that you document with, oh, look what we did today.
Well, we have quarterly milestones that we laid out in terms of pushing each of the 3 cancer problems forward, and we continue to make progress on that. We have models that are in many cases exceeding state of the art or inventing state of the art on these problems, so we're very happy about kind of the technical progress on that front. We've also been pushing forward on the current hardware, so Candle runs on the entire machines of Titan and Cori and Theta. Soon it'll run, as soon as the Summit back into production, we'll be able to run on Summit. And we've demonstrated scalability on the full machine. And so for all the kind of technical goals, I think we're making great progress. Scientifically, progress in cancer is a slow but steady, march in some sense. And we're very happy and grateful for the collaboration with the National Cancer Institute. We have great partners in Eric Stahlberg and George Zaki and others there who have really embraced Candle as an environment for which all of the National Cancer Institute and even beyond that. I've been invited to various workshops, NIH and the National Institute of Aging and other which is not directly to do with cancer, but because they're interested in applying machine learning to problems in biomedical science. So NIH is really taking this seriously, and they're also finding ways to leverage the projects they have, the many, many dozens and hundreds of projects that NCI funds, to find projects that might feed us additional data or might be able to get collaborators hooked up with us. So it's a very active engagement. And so we're quite happy. We couldn't be happier with in terms of an aggressive, in a positive way, kind of partner that's helping with that. So it's been a really interesting last couple of years seeing this or putting this together and getting it moving. And we still have a long way to go, but we're quite happy with the progress. The Candle since last year has been up on GitHub. It's all available as benchmarks. There's now over a dozen benchmarks out there. Problems people can play with, get their hands dirty. The data is self-loading. It's easy to get started.
Yep.
So,
awesome. Anything we haven't covered about Candle that you'd like to chat about?
No, I don't think so. It's a great team. I'm very happy that we have a team that involves 4 labs and the National Cancer Institute and some university partners. A lot of enthusiasm from the students. One thing that Bob Grossman and I from the University of Chicago, Bob and I both team taught a course last fall in machine learning and cancer that was inspired by, or driven in some sense by the work that we're doing here in Candle. And we're going to do that course again this winter. And so there's a pretty large, I'd say, demand curve for bringing together people that are thinking about the computer science and the math and statistics with the folks thinking about cancer therapy development and understanding cancer more deeply. So,
okay, Rick, thank you.
Sure.
Great update.
Thanks a lot.
We've been speaking with Rick Stevens. Rick is the Exascale Computing Project's principal investigator for the Candle project. For the Exascale Computing Project, I'm Mike Bernhardt.